So this video is your mini lesson on eulogies and elegies. All right, so let's start with eulogies. A eulogy is a speech that is given in memory of someone. It's typically given at a funeral or a memorial service, like a wake. It is usually somber, but it should reflect the individual, the deceased. So it can include humor if that is appropriate for the deceased and the individual giving the eulogy as well. It is very important in a eulogy that you are specific and personal. If you do not know the individual well, then you should not be the one giving the eulogy. The first thing you need to do when writing your eulogy for someone else, obviously you wouldn't be writing your own eulogy, that'd be strange, is establish the tone. Is it going to be humorous? Is it going to be serious the entire time? Is it celebratory? So are you celebrating the person's life? A eulogy does not have to be sad the entire time. It does not have to be somber the entire way through. It does not have to be serious the entire way through. You should just make sure that in your eulogy, you are including accurate information about the deceased and that you are establishing your feelings about the deceased as well as the general consensus about the deceased. So basic rules of an elegy, or of a eulogy, pardon me, include dwelling on the positive. Here we go. So don't dwell on the negatives about the person, dwell on the positives about the person. Be honest, but don't include things that might make the listeners uncomfortable, that might make the other people there present uncomfortable. Make sure that your honesty is not like shocking. So avoid talking negatively about the person and include anecdotes about the individual. An anecdote is a short story. You want to include anecdotes because it gives it a very personal feel and establishes your relationship with the individual. So, how to write it. You need an introduction, right? Your introduction should include a hook. It's the same thing as a paper. When you are writing the beginning of your eulogy, you want to make sure that you introduce yourself, but that you're not doing it in a bland or impersonal manner. So what I mean by that is you're not going to stand there and say, "Hi, my name is Carrie Galley, and I am going to give you a eulogy about the Great Gatsby, the Great Jay Gatsby." No, you want something more personal. So you want to maybe introduce yourself by how you know the deceased. What was your relationship with the deceased? So for example, if I were to write a eulogy for my best friend, when I met Tori, we were 12 years old, and I immediately decided that we were going to be best friends. So I established who the deceased was. I said when we met, and I established that she was my best friend, or is my best friend. Okay. So some other things to include in your eulogy. Here we go. You want to include basic information about the deceased. Very generally, if you know anything about their birth and childhood, you should include that. Where did they go to college? What jobs did they have? Did they achieve or receive any awards or accomplishments? What was their family life like? What were some hobbies and interests? What are some qualities or characteristics that made this person memorable or set him apart? And what will people miss about him? All right, so we also need to talk about an elegy. Elegy and eulogy sound very similar, but they are, or they can be. But an elegy is a reflective poem that laments the loss of someone or something, while a eulogy is written in prose or in paragraph form. An elegy is written in verse. So, if you all know the song American Pie is actually believed to be an elegy written for Buddy Holly. It is an elegy can be a song, it can be a short poem, it can be a long poem, but it definitely has some specific elements that we're going to talk about in a minute. So, what's the difference between an elegy and a eulogy? Well, an elegy is a poem or a song, which means it's written in verse or stanzas, and it tends to have a tone of remorse. It is lamenting the dead. There is sadness there. And then a eulogy is an essay or short piece of prose. It's written in paragraph form, and it is typically a tone of respect in remembrance. Elegies are sad. Elegies have that mournful tone the entire time. When you write your elegy, or when you write an elegy, you want to make sure that you remember that it is a poem. Okay, it's not an essay, it's a poem. So you may want to include elements, poetic elements, such as rhyming, such as a specific rhythm or a specific beat. You want to make sure that how the speaker feels about the loss of the subject comes through. So that would be the tone. Traditionally, an elegy is written in three parts: the lament, the praise, and the solace. Lament is where you discuss how saddened and downtrodden you feel because of the death of the individual. The second stanza is typically praise for the individual and what the individual has done. And the third stanza offers solace to the individual as well as the deceased and the listeners. However, you can do a loosely structured poem as well. It does not have to be in that traditional three-part. But it should be remorseful and sad. All right. And so ends our mini lesson on eulogies and elegies. If you have any questions, shoot me an email.